My name is Joshua Wenner, and I am the president of Co-Founders Lab. And today is a mentoring and coaching call for the Co-Founders Lab Startup Accelerator. For those of you that don't know, the Startup Accelerator is it's a program to help you go from idea to build out your MVP, get product market fit, refine your pitch deck, and practice your pitch so that you can get in front of investors and get your startup where it needs to go. So we do 6 calls a month, one of them being a networking call, 4 of them being these mentoring Q&A calls where we bring on advisors from our advisor network and answer your specific questions. And then we do a pitch practice once a month. And that's just a chance to pitch in front of advisors and get feedback on your pitch. So excited today to have 3 advisors, investors on the call to give feedback and thoughts. First, we have Steve Layman, who a lot of you, if you've been on here before, have seen him. Steve is an investor in both Co-Founders Lab and Business Rockstars. And Steve started his own startup like every other founder and turned that into a very large exit. He's also been CEO of both New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ companies, and he's invested in over 50 companies and startups. And his largest one being by a name of a man named Mark Cuban, who many of you probably recognize, and that was at broadcast.com. So grateful to have you on the call today, Steve.
Thanks, Josh.
We're also joined by 2 other advisors, or 2 advisors today. One of them is Mike Cooper, and Mike's a CEO, CTO, and he's an experienced startup CEO, and he has 30 years of startups. He's founded 5 startups, including one that's been operating profitably for 25 years. And it seems like he has 30 years of experience working in Fortune 500 enterprises in Sun Microsoft Systems, Oracle, Qualcomm, and numerous other ones as head of IT. So any of you that have questions about IT, great chance to get some feedback from Mike on those questions. Mike, you want to just give a little wave? So
everyone, nice to be here. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for joining us. And we're also joined by George. Is it George Bandarian? Is that correct, George?
Yeah, Josh.
Hey, thanks for joining us, George. And George is the founder and managing director of Untapped. It's an innovative hybrid startup, studio, accelerator, and venture fund based in LA. And over the past 3 years, George has had successful multi-million-dollar an exit. He's invested in multiple tech startups and venture funds. And he's led startup teams as fractional CRO and COO roles. And he's also helped launch a number of teams across different accelerator roles. So he's got a lot of experience in a lot of different industries across the board. So he can help you. And again, the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, is really about execution. Is that fair to say, George? Helping companies execute and get where they need to be?
Exactly.
Focused
on revenue, which is, our only definition of traction.
Awesome. So I want to welcome you both to the call. And, I'd like to start off first with both of you being here for everybody that's on. While we're getting started, if everybody that's on, if you'll just go ahead and write in the comments your name, where you're calling in from, the time it is, and also your 1-sentence elevator pitch. And for those that are in the accelerator, you get first dibs on asking your questions. Go ahead and also ask a question as we get started. But I wanted to start off first. I'll start with you first, George. Your perspective right now, we do this on the calls with new advisors that come on, of what you see happening in the marketplace, current trends. It could be anything that would be valuable to a startup. You've also been in the worked with a lot of accelerators with companies. So it could also be just standard startup insight that you feel are some best practices. So it could be, either startups best practices or anything that you see what's happened with the market or economy based on COVID. That could be an opportunity or interesting insight for those that are on today's call.
Yeah, sure. Would love to. Thanks again for inviting me. I know Josh, you and I have been talking for a while, so I'm glad to be on and get to experience the Co-Founders Lab and hopefully make some impact today. I think my take on COVID, dual-sided, right? On one hand, we have to acknowledge the fact that it's a very difficult situation, right? It's hard to get customers, it's hard to get investors, but the reason for that is a lot of assumptions have changed. And I like what one of my friends, a VC, said, is everything in life is an assumption now, right? It's like, it's been the great reset. and you have to question a lot of what we assume to be true about life has changed in the last few months. From an entrepreneur's perspective, it also represents great opportunity. And so, in chaos, there's opportunity. So I think it's also a great time. I think we've all seen the stats that some of the best startups, the tools that we use today, like Slack and Instagram, many of them were born during the recession, during the last one or the previous one. So I think it's a great time, but it's difficult. I think the opportunities we're seeing, at least that I'm personally passionate about, is in future of work and well-being. So my personal passion and my massively transformative purpose in life, my MTP, is around helping people live their best lives. And so I think that there's this intersection of well-being and how do people live their best lives, how do they self-actualize, and how do we take good care of ourselves, not just from COVID and making sure we're healthy, but really living our best lives. I think one thing that this great reset has done is help people question, like, what am I working on? Is this, if I'm employed, is this where I should be working at? And if it's a startup, is this really what I want to invest my next 5 to 10 years into? And if it's, so that's on the well-being side. And then the future of work, obviously COVID changed a lot of things, not just remote and distributed work, but also there was other trends that were at play in regards to AI and automation and robotics that are, displacing a lot of jobs. And so what does the future of work look like? And how do we make sure that people have fair and gainful employment going forward? How do you reskill and retool? So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there. And so at Untapped, that's kind of what we're focused on, is the intersection of the future of work and well-being. I could go on and on, but
yeah, no, this is helpful. And just one more thought while you're here. You said something really important when we were starting about revenue. Can you maybe just speak about that for a minute for anybody that's on? We talk a lot about traction in this accelerator, and could you maybe look at it from the perspective of how valuable is revenue from your perspective, and a kind of startup being able to generate revenue? Why is that the benchmark, so that those that are new to this conversation, that would be valuable?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's a lot of great startup literature out there and kind of great people to follow. I'm personally a certified coach with Lean Stack, which is Ash Maria's work with running lean, scaling lean. He created the lean canvas. So we use that as the foundation. That methodology is what we use as the foundation of our programs and helping founders. And so it's really, from there, Ash has done a lot of great work around identifying that, what gets a business is a business that generates revenue, right? And so at a basic level, I think we have to remember that. But for a startup, I think the days of, I have X many eyeballs or visitors or users, I think those days are long gone. It's really about, traction. As an investor, I've invested in a number of companies, and that's the first thing I look at, even for an early stage, right? We've seen a lot of trends where a lot of the requirements from investors at different stages has moved upstream. So I think today, in a post-COVID or still in COVID environment, it's difficult for an investor who can't really see what the future looks like to be able to just take a look at an MVP or an idea. And even for an angel, you want to see some traction, and the best validation of traction is that revenue. Now, you don't need a product to get that early validation. And so just, I guess, the early revenue is the best sign of validation, and validation is the reduction of risk in your business model. And that's really what investors are looking at in the beginning, is how much risk is there with this idea, and how much has the entrepreneur done to de-risk this? And the best answer to that question is not by email signups or things like that. It's really by pre-orders, pre-sales, or early customers, beta customers, and showing that you have that monetization model figured out.
Spot on. Yeah. So and I totally agree with that. So again, we talk about it a lot, but revenue is the best Some of the other things can help if you don't have revenue, but it's always the best thing. Showing revenue gives you massively reduces risk. So thanks for sharing that, George. And again, for anybody that has questions around that, it'd be some good questions to ask today. If you have questions about generating revenue or how to get to revenue or any of those. So Mike, also wanted to open it up to you. Anything just from, different than what George has already said about COVID or just startup related, you being in the CTO side, we've talked a lot about, man, founders have made so many mistakes around their hiring a tech team or paying a bunch of money and then they don't get the technology done and they don't even have access to the code. And so any perspective from the lens you're looking at that could be helpful for the entrepreneurs today? A lot of people probably needing to build out tech or anything new around the COVID situation.
Happy to talk about that. I do want to follow on to what George was saying. Some of the startups I've been involved with, revenue was a 4-letter word. It was something that was not taken very seriously. It was all about what was being raised and spending, and that really lost a lot of perspective. One of the early starts, my first startup, went on to raise about $320 million, and they blew through almost all that money in the course of 3.5 years. And it was basically they said, we have all this money, so we should spend it. And so they spent all their time focused on just spend, scale. And revenue was an afterthought. And eventually the money ran out and no one wanted to put any more in, and it disappeared along with millions of other startups. So revenue is far more important today than it has been in the past. Just to transition, my current experience is in enterprise software, and just to give some feedback on what I've seen and what some other companies that I'm close to have seen, sales in general in the enterprise space, in IT spend space, has slowed a little bit. There've been like little pauses, but nothing as dramatic as some feared early on. A lot of the projects really that we were involved in, and these other companies I know of, kind of went through a 2-3 month pause as the IT organizations all of a sudden had to pivot 190 degrees, 360 degrees in some cases, and start providing remote services and improving their security around remote access and those type of things. So I think a lot of that is now being caught up in these large IT organizations, and the ability for these organizations to come back and focus on new projects, new technologies is, at least what we're seeing so far, is it's slowly getting back to where it was back in February or March. So I think there's a lot of hope and positivity there. I think there was there could have been a far worse dip than there was, but all the signs are that it is pretty positive now. Now, that's not to say it's going to stay that way. I think the global COVID situation will continue to impact IT spending and the ability of IT organizations to evaluate new products and new services. I think the ability for these organizations to take risk is reduced because of concerns over budgets. So IT organizations, mid to large size enterprise, have annual budget cycles, and generally they're fairly fixed. But as this COVID situation goes along, these new budget cycles come up for these companies, and they look at risk factors for the next year. And a lot of the budgeting is done and controlled by the CFO or someone like that, the CIO working with CFO. And so the ability, these people are generally risk adverse, so they're seeing global trends, threats to their business. They're going to scale back their spending. So I think there will be, and there is, and there will continue to be a risk adverse climate. to adopting new services and technologies. And so you really have to prove your value that much harder than before COVID. In good times, organizations are more risk. They're better able to handle risk, and they're more willing to. And in challenging situations like COVID, their risk adversity really goes down. So you have to have a little bit extra, both on the effort and what you're actually delivering to make a difference.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. So I'm going to jump into questions. I'm going to start first with the question from Arvind. Is Arvind still here? Let's see. I don't see. I was looking around for you for a minute.
Yep.
Okay. If you just quickly just say your name, your company, and your 30-second elevator pitch.
Sure. Hi, I'm Arvind Murali. My company is called Drona, and what we're trying to do is democratize access to education by empowering teachers and having them create content on the fly according to the needs of their particular 30, 40 students, instead of giving them pre-positioned content and having them repeat that to the students. And so we're essentially a platform, and this allows us to scale pretty quickly and with good aggressiveness.
Great. And then your question was around revenue expectations. Is it how to build financial projections, or
Yeah.
Question?
So for something like that's fundamentally scalable as this idea, so you could potentially project, like, if I take on 100,000 schools, then my revenue potential is in the billions, but obviously that's not practical. And so I was trying to understand what's a practical way to approach, how to project revenue, say into the next 2 years or 5 years. And what are some of the metrics that you should be concerned about in terms of expectations and stuff like that?
Great. So open it up. And I'd also say, if possible, if you could turn on your camera, it's great to see you. Put a name to a face of anybody that we're asking questions with. It's really good if we're seeing you. We'll start off first with George, your response to that piece on building financial projections to convey potential. What is do you have a methodology around that, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in no business plans, no big financial projections, because they're usually wrong anyway. It's really about creating a lean canvas and going out and validating it. And once you start building it, it becomes clearer. Of course, you do need to understand your TAM, your total addressable market, and understanding where could this go. But I think the tactical solution that we use is, so we have something we call the traction roadmap. So in order for it to be venture scale, it's gotta be a $10 million company in 3 years, right? If it's gonna be venture scale, it's gotta be able to have a $1 billion valuation, which generally means 100 million in ARR. So in order to get there, let's take a step back from 100 million in ARR and get to 10 million in ARR. In 3 years. In order to get there, let's get to 1 million of ARR, which would be product market fit in 2 years. And then in order to get there, let's get to $100,000 of ARR in a year. In order to get there, let's get to $10,000 of ARR in 90 days. So that's kind of the milestones we help founders orient around. So I would say figure out the big picture at a high level, but to me, when they say this is a $10 billion market, I think investors pass their own, if you're providing a childcare service that's for your local community, obviously that's going to have limitations on its scale, versus if you're providing a global self-learning education tool that every person could use for different content, as an example. So an investor could quickly see what the long-term scale is. And so I think what really matters, I think what is more helpful to the founder is setting up your initial guideposts and then just focusing on hitting that. I don't know if I answered your question or took it to where I wanted to take it, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick summary that's really helpful. If you want venture funding, they have to be able to get a return. So just recapping, 10K 90 days, 100K in a year, $1 million in 2 years, 10 million in 3 years, and eventually to get to $1 billion trajectory. So really helpful if you guys are building that. You hear Steve said a lot of times when companies are pitching, I've heard Steve say it's not enough trajectory. What essentially that means is there's not enough to invest and get a return. If you don't have enough trajectory, you're not going to get there. So really helpful metrics. Anything else to add to that, Mike? If not, I'll move on to the next question.
One of the things I've learned being in startups is not to gaslight anyone. So George said it best. I have nothing to add.
Cool. Okay, cool. I'm going to go next to Artie. Are you there?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
We can. Are you able to turn your video on by chance?
Yeah, can you guys see me now too?
Let's see, where did it bounce to? Yep, got you. Cool. And if you can, same thing, just quick, your name, where you're calling in from, and 30-second elevator pitch, and then we'll get into your question. Unless we lost you. I think we lost you. We'll come back to you, Artie. Okay, I'm going to move next to Natalia. Hi, Natalia. Go ahead and just unmute on your side. There should be a little.
Hello?
There you go. Yeah, we're going to swing back. We lost you for a sec, Artie. I'm going to move forward. I'll swing back to you after.
Okay.
Okay, Natalia, are you there?
Yeah. Am I on?
Yep. If you just start, same thing with your name, a 30-second elevator pitch, where you're calling in from, and then we'll get into your question.
Yeah, Natalia Vashkovets-Moby calling from Sydney. I'm working on Australian Knowledge Network, which will be a kind of network of networks that would make it easier for professionals and managers of projects and people to find the right people and connect quicker and at a scale. So there's a bit of a technical tools that will complement, which should allow people to collaborate more effectively with externals. So the two questions that I have, the first one is around prioritization. So I myself have a finance background, so I kind of can do the projections and all that. And at this early stage, I really want to make sure that the initial product actually pays for the development of the actual MVP. So I guess, and because at this stage, I find that it's very difficult to put the right team together. So I have advisors, but I'm really the main person who works on everything. So I guess from your perspective and from your experience, what should be the balance of working on what pays the bills and what really will come in a bit later? The product that would pay the bills, which is potentially common educational masterclasses and seminars, but I want to really use it to test the market, to see how people collaborate and test my methods before I put it into, before the systems are finalized and developed. And the second question is technical co-founder. So I found a few people, but not quite comfortable to have a co-founder. So I guess from your perspective, if I just write the specs and pay someone to do it versus do I keep looking to find that right person who would really be into what I'm trying to do?
Great. So I'm going to have George do question one, and Mike will lead with question two. So George, question one on, sounds like, what is the right prioritization for building out an MVP in the lean startup process? When you say prioritization, how far along are you? Do you have an MVP built, or you're in that process of validation? Have you validated product, or have you validated there's a problem and validated that there's a solution that could work, or where are you at?
So really at the very beginning, so the validation is at the point when I'm talking to my existing networks and basically one-on-one feedback rather than actually testing the market.
Got it. George, you want to dive into that one? It sounds like she's asking for like a landscape of how do I prioritize this, and what are the couple of the steps high level to lean into?
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, as you're doing discovery on your network, are you also testing monetization at all? Like, you know, how big of a problem is it? How much would they be willing to pay to have it solved?
I kind of come from the event industry, so I know what sells now and what the market is now for the initial product. So there is a niche and the market's already tested. So the initial product is easy. So it's just finding the right topics that there's enough expertise that they can attract. But for the product that they actually want to build, I think it will really depend on what the market says, because I really want to pivot to come up with something that would be people would be really interested in. So I really don't know how much it's going to be. So the initial stage is probably provided for free, just to find where the actual demand is.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to share two things that should be helpful to you and might be for others as well, because this is kind of common things. So one of the things that I love about, basically, you know, my mind thinks in terms of the lean canvas, right? So we're talking about your early adopters, and so what you're trying to find is the desperate early adopters, and not that they're desperate as humans, but they're so desperate with the problem that they have that as soon as you tell them what your solution is, they're ready to sign up on the spot, right? They're basically like, oh my God, Natalia, where have you been all my life? Here's my credit card. How soon can I have it? You want to get a handful of those desperate early adopters to start with, and they're going to help you get your initial traction. They may not be your mass market customers later, but that's a different stage, and we worry about problems of different stages at different stages. We worry about what we need to worry about right now. So I think so. That's the tactical advice I would have is your answers will come through what people are willing to pay for, by the how well you're nailing the problem to be solved, the jobs to be done framework. I'm a big fan of that. If you guys aren't familiar with it, I would look up the jobs to be done. So they have a job to be done. So you want to find a very big job to be done or a very big problem, and then be able to validate how much they'd be willing to pay for it. I think the other aspect of your question, which I also hear in what you're saying in terms of like, I think I got a little confused between these two initiatives, and I'm not really 100% sure exactly what it is you do, even though you explained it for a few minutes. So I think like founders tend to talk about what they do in terms of the solution. The quick pitch recommendation is to talk about it in terms of the problem, right? So I'm solving the problem of people in Australia being unemployed and not finding the right work or something like that. It just makes it a little bit clearer. But the main point that I was going to say is, another one of the key mindsets that we teach is right action, right time. So one of the things that happens to founders, and I kind of hear this from you, is that it's so overwhelming, right? There's so much to do. Do I work on product A or B? And I have all these things to do. Do I talk to the co-founder? And so this is going to be a golden nugget, which is usually there's only one thing you need to be doing. So focus on identifying what that one thing is. What is my single most important thing I need to be doing in this sprint that I'm in? So like set up a 2-week sprint for yourself. And there's usually only 1 or 2 things you need to accomplish in that sprint, which usually have to do around validating your riskiest assumptions or de-risking your business or breaking a constraint. Identify what that is and focus on that one thing. So if it's finding a technical co-founder, go do that. If it's finding my first 10 paying customers to know what course I should build, go do that. And only work on that. Don't try to juggle, multitask, all those things. Just focus on the one thing, accomplish that. Say, what did I learn? Okay, now where do I go next? Now what's 2 weeks later? You say, now what's my one thing? And I think that's going to help you a lot with kind of getting focused and moving forward.
I just want to add to what George said, because what he said is so important. I can tell you as an investor, there was a meeting that I decided to take because I was very interested in this product. And I sat down, I hadn't reviewed a deck. I only heard about the idea, didn't know anything about the company. And I sat down with the company CEO and I said, look, do me a favor, just give me a quick run through of your deck. Just take 3 minutes, run through your deck. And he goes, well, my deck is 107 pages long. And I went, oh my God. You know, I said, all right, give me your best idea of what you're working on right now. And he said, well, I've got like 10 things that I'm doing. And at that point in time, I was out. All right. The meeting lasted about 2 more minutes just because I didn't want to end it before 3 minutes. But you've got to be very careful, you know, when you're approaching investors to make sure that you are focused, you know, on creating something that you can succeed with, particularly early on in a startup. If you present way too many ideas to an investor before you've proven even one thing, 99 times out of 100, we're out.
Really good insight. Yeah, go ahead, Natalia. Did you say?
Thank you so much. No, it's focus is a really big thing when the resources are a bit constricted.
And super helpful conversation for everybody on the call, both from George, Steve, and
Thank you.
Moving into the co-founder conversation. We'll go with that as well, just because I know this relates to everybody. Mike, did you want to answer that question?
Yeah, the technology side's pretty interesting. Your situation is very typical. You know, when you're looking at what to do about implementing your technology stack, it's a question of time and money. So if you don't pay attention to it, as you go through and you want to do MVPs, you're going to go out, find one of the million outsourcing options you have. You're going to throw something on the wall, and 1 out of 4 times you'll get something that you want. So finding someone who can navigate the technology side for you is pretty important. So the thing you can do is you can use someone, something like Co-Founders Lab, to find a part-time technology advisor. Ideally, you want someone who's really committed to what you're doing. And it's really hard when you're in that MVP stage and you don't really have something to show. But the sooner you get someone to take ownership of the technology stack, the more efficient you're going to be as you go through MVPs, as you try different options, because that person's going to give you efficiency in keeping your scope very laser focused. For the most part, keeping your technology something that you can continually revision as opposed to throw out. So when you don't have technology guidance or you have bad guidance, one of the inefficiencies is you can go through many different options in technology stacks that are completely incompatible. So if you don't have someone and you want to develop an MVP, if you put out a bid, you'll get 100 different responses. 99 of them will be completely different, and they won't tell you that. You won't know unless you know the right questions to ask and what to put in your requirements to make sure that the technology stack you get is something that you can pick up and revise and revise and revise. And if you don't have that, I've seen so many people struggle with that. They get a great price on an MVP, and then they want to build on it, and what they have, it barely functions, which is fine for MVP, but it's in such bad state that you can't readily find someone to revise that and to build upon it. It's a throwaway, and throwaways are fine, but if you can avoid it, okay, you're going to save a lot of time and money, and that's why having the guidance and in terms of overall design, programming languages, services, if you're designing a technology stack, just on a cloud service front, you have a lot of options. And once you commit to one of those, it's really hard to change course. And that costs you a lot of time and a lot of money. And so finding someone early on to guide you is pretty important.
And just to, Okay.
Would you have several people, or because I kind of have a couple, but I feel that maybe it's not the full scope. And if they are a co-founder, so you kind of can, I guess, rely on them to make a full make a decision because they've got they all in. But if they're not, it's a little difficult.
I'll just speak to one piece of this real quick because we talk about this quite a bit. Is completely agree with Mike's perspective on it. From our perspective, we recommend working with somebody really high level like a Mike or somebody that knows all the languages and codes for advice that can give you a kind of a sign off. Exactly what Mike's saying is like, hey, here's the scope. Does this make sense? Like, is this done relevant with the right language, the right code to protect myself? Like, how's this built? And so the people that are giving you offers, you're reviewing it with them and making sure it's a good code. Because if not, we've seen people, we had somebody come in, they spent $250,000 and didn't even get their technology done for an MVP. And it's a perfect example of missed expectations, not knowing what was happening. Or to Mike's point, somebody creates a piece of code. We've had other people that they can't use it because it was built on outdated code, very complicated. Nobody works on it anymore. So just having somebody high level that knows what's out there and can say, hey, here's what it needs to be built on one of these 3 languages, and make sure you own the code database. And right, there's a couple key things. So Kasha just posted the link. Mike is one of our advisors for, looking at content from a CTO perspective. So for anybody on here, we have, both George and Mike are on there and 50 other vetted advisors. So highly recommend to sit down with an advisor, ask them a question for an hour, help them get insight before you build something out, because it can really save you a lot of time and energy and headaches. And it's also a good question that if you got a couple potential co-founders, you'll get some good perspective. You have somebody high level like a Mike that goes, hey, right on par with what makes total sense. He could give you a deeper sense of confidence in somebody if there's a lot of resonance already with what they're saying.
And just add on to that.
Yeah.
Natalie, back to your question is when you have multiple people, you really want someone who is in charge of the overall architecture, and having people feed into that, that's great. And if you have, a couple people who are, great architects, you're very lucky. But a lot of the technical advice you're going to get tends to be for people who are technical people, but they're not architects. They're not people who can look across a broad spectrum of your needs. They're people who bring their own native biases. So you'll get advice from people who are really great PHP programmers, and they'll never tell you that Java would be the right thing for you. Those are the types of things you need someone to take the overall technology stack and make some basic guidance for you. And then you can go about filling in how that's sourced, and you can do some outsourcing. You can have some of your own on staff do that. But you have to, and if you can get that person as a co-founder, even part-time, that's great. But it's hard to get someone to commit when you're in your really early stages.
Look, the overarching theme to what's being discussed here, whether it's a technology stack or any real sector that you're working on, is it's critical to find high caliber people to work with. All right. I mean, one of the things that everybody has to realize is know what you're good at and know where you need help. And do not let your ego drive business decisions, because it'll kill you. All right. Everybody has strengths. Everybody has weaknesses, and recognize your weaknesses. And by the way, that's not a weakness. That's a strength. You need to be able to identify in yourself what you're good at and what you need help with. And what I always did, and I stepped in my own way so many times in the beginning because I didn't do this. I tried to just kind of work with people that I thought could help me. Forget it. Find the best people. And, you see with both Mike and George, these guys have a high caliber level of expertise. You're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't at least talk to advisors that have a high caliber of expertise. All right. And by the way, those advisors will change depending on where you are in the the framework of your company. But look, surround yourself with people brighter than you are. I've always done that, and it was to my benefit. All right, and I'll give you one example. I had in my first public company, we had Michael Milken and News Corp that became investors in my first public company after we were public. And they ended up buying about a 30% position in my company. Well, I had a mentor that I worked with very closely. And I went to him, a New York billionaire. I went to him and I said, look, I'm coming in the ring with Michael Milken and the representatives from News Corp. And I need you to negotiate this deal for me. Now, even though he was my mentor, he's not an investment banker. You know, the guy's a billionaire, works on lots of deals. But he decided to negotiate the deal for me because he thought it would be sport to negotiate against Milken. All right. And by the way, on the exit, he saved us probably, you know, millions of dollars based on the things that he did. Could I have gone in and negotiated that deal with one of my, you know, attorneys? 100%. You know, would it have been as effective? No way. So particularly as you scale your company and as you have needs, Natalia, you know, early on, God, it's so important to work with really credible people who can help you. You'll save yourself time, mistakes, and money.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Natalia. Great insights. All right, I'm moving over to Gina. You there, Gina?
Hi, I'm here. Hi,
There you
Josh.
are. How are you?
Good. So,
Yeah,
do I
just
do-
start the same way. Name where you're calling in from and your 30-second elevator pitch, and then we'll get into your question.
okay, so hi, I'm Gina Fitzgerald. I own Q6, which is a platform that it's an integrated platform where businesses and consumers collaborate through video reviews. And, you know, the problems that we're solving are the fake reviews that are out there and how to differentiate quality companies. So that's it. I'm from Westchester, New York. It's sunny here.
Great. And what's your question?
So my question is, so I'm in the process of building the MVP. And that took like a year and a half to make that decision and go through all the, you know, stuff that you go through with that. So I'm there and now I have to go out, and I've had great companies that have, prior to COVID, really loved the concept, want to, you know, jump on. And I had given them prices way back, but now after COVID, I don't want to lose the value of what I'm giving to them. And I don't know what I should charge, or the ask of that, of coming onto the platform, should be now, because I don't want to, I know they're not going to be spending as much as they are, or they way back before. And so now I don't want to go out there with the same model that I had previously, because I want to be conscious of the new change that's out there. Does that make sense? Did that come out right?
Yeah, George, you want to speak to this one?
Yeah. So who was the market again? Who's the customer?
So the market would be small to medium businesses.
And generally, like, is there a niche or?
Yes, so it's a platform where businesses come onto, they get video reviews, but not only that, we give a lot of service to them coming onto the platform through videos.
So like a Yelp with videos?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So you're concerned that the small businesses may not be willing to pay for, may not have as much budget based on they were hit by COVID. Yeah, so I think the key word there is assume. So just go do all your discovery, right? I think it's a great time to contact all the prospective customers and be able to do rediscovery, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I know we talked 6 months ago, but the world has completely changed. Do you mind if we hop on a 15-minute Zoom call? I just want to see how you're doing, how your business is doing. And again, like I said in the beginning, everything is an assumption. Don't assume anything and just go validate it. It's easier to go on with that discovery hat than your sales hat. You're going to have an easier job to see, are they still a desperate early adopter? And if so, how much is this pain costing them that they're willing to pay? So I mean, I think that I wouldn't assume you need to discount your price. And in some cases, you know, businesses are, you know, like their priorities have changed. So some things are more important, some things are less important. So I would just go in and talk to 50 small businesses and see what data you gather. And you could test different price points, or you could get them to put up you know, what would you be willing to pay, you know. But again, there's a whole sales.
Sorry, I did do that. I sent out a big survey to them and stuff, and they're willing to pay, but I just don't, you know, there was a lot of them there, like, I would still pay for this, but I just don't know what, like, what strategy should I really be discounted in the front and then maybe, you know, keep them on for a year and say, okay, now we're going to raise everything. Like, is that the right way to do that? Did that make sense? You know,
I think there's a lot of things swirling in your mind, and I would just test the assumptions. I mean, whatever you think the right price is, you know, run that by a few people, like just jump on some Zoom calls and start getting your pre-orders. Right?
Yeah. Okay. I get what you're saying. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I mean, if we're talking about pricing strategy, I mean, one of the things that I love is, you know, and this might help you if you're kind of looking for something more tactical, so I mean, I love the doubling your price methodology, right?
Right.
So you could start with whatever you think is a fair price, and then, you know, get one or two people that say yes to, you know, $20 per month. Then on your next few calls, test out $40 per month. Then on your next calls, test out $80 per month. And at some point, people will start saying that's way too expensive. And now you've found exactly where you need to be.
Right.
It was one step before everybody started saying no.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to add that I do something similar what George does. You know, pricing is kind of an art, and when you're unsure and you're creating a new product, you're like, I don't know what the price is at. So I look at it as a floor ceiling model. So find the floor, the minimum price that you're selling for on a consistent basis, and work your way up. Find the ceiling when people stop buying it. So you can do that by hopefully getting people to tell you what they want to pay. You can do A/B testing. Depends on how automated your sales process is. I also am a big believer in discounting, especially if you're in retail-like businesses where they're used to discounts. You go in and it's like, you know, my price is $1,000, but for the first year we're offering a 60% discount. Okay, this is a 1-year introductory price, and you can use that as a way of later raising your price, either to the full amount or to a lower discount amount, and so that you don't feel like you're locked into a given price to start with.
Right. Okay. I mean, does anybody still use that ambassador to come on as an ambassador? And
yeah, I was just going to say that's the other, I love everything Mike said. I agree with all that. And that was the only other thing I was going to add was, you know, you use essentially what he said, you know, our pricing is $100 a month, but for the first 50 clients, the VIP customers, the beta customers, the ambassador customers, the advisory customers, whatever you call it, you know, this is what you get. You get, you know, 30% off the price for X period of time. Sometimes it's lifetime, sometimes it's for a period of time. And you get these additional benefits. You get my cell phone number, you get, you know, VIP customer support, you get, you know, personal onboarding, all the things you would have to do anyway, because they're your first few customers and you need to make sure that they're going to go good. But like, you list them out as bullets, and then you say, essentially it creates urgency and scarcity for them. So they know that they need to make a decision now, because you have meetings after their meeting and you're going to probably fill the 25 slots you have. So you say, I already have 12 people. I only have 13 more slots. You know, I want to see if you're interested in becoming one of our ambassador clients. Here are the benefits. And that creates urgency. And again, if they're a desperate early adopter at that point, like, they're probably going to say, yeah, count me in.
right. Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Gina. All right, I'm coming back to Artie. You there, Artie?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Awesome. So hey guys, my name is Artie. I'm from Toronto. Right now I work in commercial banking at one of the big 5 banks is my main job. And on the side, I'm trying to build a head-to-head esports betting startup. So basically it's just going to be a platform where me and you or anybody else can go online, get matched with another user and bet money head-to-head on their favorite video games. And my question is this, in order to really validate the product market fit, we're struggling a little bit because to build an MVP, a revenue generating MVP, so that it's not like a throwaway later on, it's going to cost us about 100 G's. It's expensive, and neither me or my business partner are technical founders. But one thing that we do have is we have a competitor who's offering the exact same value proposition as us and is a first mover in the market. Their name is Players Lounge. And they've gained significant traction with their user base, but a large portion of their customers are unhappy with their product because there's a lot of things that, you know, could be better. And me and my friend, my business partner, want to innovate on top of that platform and build a better one. So we're wondering if that's enough of a product market validation in order to raise some equity to build a first version of our own platform so we can actually prove out our business model.
So Mike, you want to speak into this first?
Yeah, sure. So let me just tackle the technology side of it first, and that is, don't be careful you don't try and build the Taj Mahal in your first MVP. So if you're looking at what this entrenched player has and you want to solve some of those problems, think about all the effort and money they've already put into getting to where they are, and you're starting from nothing. So if you bite off too much at once, you're going to wind up spending a tremendous amount of time and money, and you're always going to play catch up. What you want to do from a more of a strategy point of view is you want to identify differentiators that you can build in a reasonable amount of time. So don't target everything that they do. Target a base level plus some other cool stuff that they don't do today, and even better if you can come up with things that would be difficult for them to do. So if they are fairly new, you can bet that their technology stack is pretty young and immature, and they may not be able to innovate quickly. That's just something you have to guess. So the more divergent you can be in what you're offering, the better chance you're going to have of developing revenue that eventually you can arc back to some kind of feature parity as you have the revenue to support that. But it's really suicide to attempt to chase someone who's already in the market. They already have revenue. They probably have some backers. It's a tail game, and you're just gonna throw your money away if that's what you target.
Yeah. So can I pile on to that, Josh?
Yeah.
So I was gonna share this earlier for Natalia's, but I know we kind of she had a get that. So anyway, it's come up now a few times. I also see a lot of talk about the MVP on the chat. So so I totally agree with what Mike's saying, and I would say so he's talking about your specs for your MVP 1.0, right? And I think that Lean Startup did an amazing job. God bless Eric Ries's soul, and it was amazing. And a few months ago was the 10-year anniversary. But one of the things that we've learned since then was that when he said build, measure, learn, it started with build. And I think that now you have a whole generation of founders that think, I come up with an idea, I go build an MVP, and then I go validate. And we've learned that that's not the right order. The right order is to first validate and then build. So I would say do not spend 100 G's building an MVP. First, get very clear on validating, and you can't use a competitor's company as your own validation. You have to validate your own business model. So you have to validate that. And there's two other alternatives to the MVP 1.0. So there's the Wizard of Oz MVP and the Concierge MVP. And so what you want to do is, I think in this case, you probably would want to do the Concierge MVP, which has been done by a lot of startups. If you look at how they started, and the Concierge MVP says, you and your co-founder just go ahead and start offering this service. Start like blasting it on social, just go into your gaming communities and say, hey, we have a new site, we offer head-to-head, gambling on gaming. And if you're interested, like, let us know or whatever. And then just start taking orders and just do it all manually without a platform. Do it enough until you get clear on what is it the customers want, what kind of games are they gambling on, how much are they putting in, what's the result, and that tells you how to build it. And now you're going to get to what Mike was saying, which is a very limited scope for your MVP, which is very focused and solves the needs of your customers. You're also going to have validated for free, because you won't have to develop any software. You're going to validate it for free. Is there a market, and what's the demand and all those things? So
what about a cease and desist letter of some sort?
Yeah, let me just add on to that for a minute, George. I have an example that really shows that concierge kind of model. There's a company called Expensify. It's a software company. You submit your expenses. They have this auto scan feature. You forward your email, you snap a picture, scans it, makes an entry. Well, when these folks launched early on, they didn't have the time or the money to actually implement that. So when you click that auto scan, what would actually happen, and what actually still does it in some cases, is it goes to an Amazon Turk farm. So Turk is this outsourcing on-demand kind of platform where you farm out all these jobs, and they farm out scan jobs. And so when you submit your receipt, it goes to some human who sits there, and for some crazy low price that should be illegal but isn't, they type in the information they see. So they didn't implement the actual scanning software until way later. And that's how they got off the ground, by doing that, kind of behind the scenes magic. And that is a viable option. There's so many outsourcing options to do things at all levels. And you can automate that kind of flow much cheaper and much easier than implementing some AI solution for scanning tags in messages. So that is a very viable way of bootstrapping yourself into proving what you're doing is valued, and that you get revenue for it, which you can then invest in developing the full automation.
Got it. That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Artie. And I like to always take a group photo, so everybody will turn on their cameras. It's good to see everybody's faces. Everybody's charging ahead, building their startups and communities, how we help each other do it. So it's always nice to see everybody's faces. We'll take a big group shot, say, hey, here's the entrepreneurs that are innovating in the world, about to have the next businesses. So it's good to see all your smiling faces. Great. This is awesome. People from all over the world gathering together. So I'm going to take a group shot on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and wave. Do a symbol, whatever you want. 1, 2, 3. Great. And I want to thank both Mike, Steve, and George for joining us today. Kasha just posted the link. If you want to book a call, you can book a call with either George or Mike and do a one-on-one call, as well as 50 other vetted advisors. Additionally, if any of you would like to join the Startup Accelerator, we have the link there, and get prioritization and getting your questions answered. Apologize for anybody we didn't get to today, but if you remember and post your question next time, we'll get to those first. So want to thank everybody for joining us today. Have a great week out there. And thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, George. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, guys. This
Thanks,
was
guys.
fun. Looking forward to doing it again soon.